Hello and welcome to season 6, episode 3 of Dualistic Unity. I am using a shitty fucking British accent. That's what I'm going for. Why? Because there's nothing that I can. Now it's falling apart. There's nothing that I can say that's going to get you to the place that you think you should be, because that place is where you're at right now. So, really, at the end of the day, we're just sharing space and time together. And there's no right way to do that. And me assuming that there's something that I could say to get you to a place of a very deep and strong, powerful insight, it's going to get you to a spot that you're better is a crock of shit. And I feel like now this is turning into a Scottish accent. So I'm going to end it here.
And I encourage you, dear listener, to go back to the beginning of this episode. Just go back with your eyes closed and try to ignore the fact that you know it's Andrew who normally does the introduction. And then just go on the merry journey throughout the world that his changing accent will take you on. That was a fantastic experience. And it really is just about doing weird, crazy shit like that. Because there's nothing weird and crazy about having fun with your life and your moment. And after 300 plus episodes, if you're not comfortable enough with the fact that it's your podcast, comfortable enough, in fact, to go, right, I talk like almost every day. Why the fuck wouldn't I just be myself? Why not? Why not throw out an accent, fuck around a bit? Because obviously anybody who is still listening to the podcast, anybody who's on this journey with us is on the journey because they want to do exactly that. Just express themselves and not worry about it. Live unapologetically. And so fucking A. Crikey.
Amen. Oh man. And it's funny too, because and now we can just, oh man, dude, it's fucking great. We can just talk about that. Like before that, I kind of had that thought earlier when I started to realize, and we can dig into this sort of you being the X factor at all times and just responsibility in and of itself, just for your experience and with that. So anyway, I had that thought of why the fuck? I always started out with hello, and it's become sort of a thing, and I've enjoyed it for sure. And that was a variation, and I'll go back to it. I'm not going to start out everything with my British, Scottish, Australian fucking mumbo jumbo, whatever that accent was, all the time. But it's there's the only thing having an aversion. And then I was thinking about it before, and I was like, is this a stupid thing to do? Is this just some dumb fucking, but I kind of want to do it. and then you just do it. Cause the only thing that's stopping you from just living your life how you want to live it is you. You can say that it's something else, someone else, and everyone has their, environment, situation that they're dealing with. But to think that you have no influence over any degree of anything at any given time, and if you're passing all of that off to whatever's going on, it's going to be a lot more difficult to make those shifts or live for yourself or be willing to be relaxed. Because as soon as you start to realize that, the stuff you're holding on to, the feelings that are coming up, the things that, for example, with weed, if you feel anxiety or paranoia with weed, it's uncomfortable to admit that that's coming from me. Oh, that's in me. It's just showing me it. But once you do, then it kind of changes a lot of the things that you do, and you don't feel like you're victim to everything or being swayed by everything, because you're your environment. So as much as there's sway both ways, and you have the potential to obviously influence your experience, but your experience is not confined to what you think you are. And so as you're willing to take responsibility for quote unquote your experience, it starts to change experience, because there's no division in that. And we think we're always getting pulled and punched at instead of having sway back on things. And you may not notice it in the immediacy, but at the same time you will, because it's your, the environment and you aren't disconnected, and it is always just your experience. So you kind of do start to experience more of an immediacy of a shift, because you're prioritizing it for yourself. And that comes very closely with taking responsibility and not saying that it's someone else's fault for how you feel. or what your response is to a situation.
It's interesting because we're not used to that level of independence, though. We're not used to the idea of living for ourselves because we grew up in a world where we had to live within the narrative that we were being taught. We went to school, there were rules, there were authorities. Those authorities had the right to tell us what to do or judge us in specific ways, and we had to judge ourselves according to their standards. And so there was always this experience of living relative to everybody else's expectations. There was always this experience of living within an environment where we had obligations that we could live up to or we could fail to live up to. And suddenly, when you're stripped of that, and there's nothing except what you want to do with this moment right here, it's really jarring because there's no sense of direction anymore. And that jarring discomfort with uncertainty, with the vastness of what you could do right now, it drives people to go and look for a structure. It drives people to go and look for someone to say, go that way, because that's way more comfortable. But when we don't do that, when we allow ourselves to actually just sit here and do what we've always been doing anyway, which is to go through one moment and then another moment and another moment, or you could say go through the same moment as it changes, however you'd like to look at it. But that has always been what we're doing. You don't have to have a set direction to still be on a path. And I think that's very much what makes us uncomfortable, is that the path is unfolding as we walk on it. There is no real way to look down it with any certainty. But if we were to say, I want to go to this destination, this is where I want to go, then we have that false sense of certainty if that's where we're going to get, which is why we get disappointed when it doesn't happen exactly that way, or when we get there and it's not exactly what we wanted it to be, because we had that certainty that it would be something. But we don't have the luxury of looking down the path with any degree of certainty. The only thing that we can truly do is get a feel for the step that we're on. And with that, you kind of get an idea of the terrain in the same way as if you were on a path and it was sloping downwards, you would get the idea that it's sloping downwards. You have a sensitivity for what's happening without necessarily knowing what's down the path. It's like, true, it could be sloping downwards and then it could be a steep climb uphill, right? So it's only sensitivity. And in that sensitivity, you have to figure out whether or not you're going to rush forward thinking that you know what's down the path just because you're building some sensitivity, or like, it's downhill, there's got to be water down here. Not necessarily. It could be a ravine that goes nowhere, right? Or uphill. Are you hesitant to go up the hill because it's hard and it's grueling, when in fact at the top of that hill could be exactly the view that you need to be able to see more of your journey, right? Not far down the journey, but at least a step and a half, which really is what we call intuition. Moments of clarity, when we can not see the end result, but see the general direction that we're going in. It's a different way of living. It really is. And again, I love comparing it to explorers in the old world. People going into areas that hadn't been explored. They had no idea what was around. They had a vague idea of what that area was within. But aside from that, it was step by step. It's like, oh, this is a river. Can't go here. Got to look for a place where the river is a little bit more shallow. Okay, now we're going to go through. Oh, this is a cliff. All right, can't go that way. And so you were blazing trail, but you were blazing trail one step at a time, seeing a little bit ahead, maybe, understanding a little bit of where you came from, maybe, but it was all approximations. And that's exactly what life is. It's all approximations. You are exploring your existence, and you should look at it that way.
And so with that example of like just being on a path, and say, as you were talking, I was getting like, hills, mountains, valleys, all these things, sometimes walls with like a ladder. And so if you think about, how a lot of people have this assumption that I can find the right thing to do, and then the faster I get there, the better. And the sooner I can get to that right thing, it's going to mean something about me, and my value is going to be higher because of it. And I was picturing how that would play out if you're on a path with a bunch of shit going on and you're focused on this point that's like way off in the distance, trying to get there as fast as you can. So you're not only not aware of what's going on, but you're sprinting at this point. You're going to get hurt, like inevitably. You think about going over a hill, you're just sprinting, you get the top of the hill, it's like a little edge, and all of a sudden it's like you're a few feet above the ground, you're falling, and then you start tumbling down the other hill, or there's a wall with a ladder or some shit, and you're just sprinting, looking at it, and then you just smack the wall, and it hurts so bad. And then, you're like, oh, there's a wall here because you weren't paying attention. And so to your point with intuition, I think that's just understanding that there's no way for your value to go up, because then you settle down. Then you realize that, oh, this thing that I'm doing right now is my whole life. There isn't a point in which my value is better. You're just picking a random spot on this path that's like very, very similar to the part of the path you're on right now. Like imagine an infinite path with like my background right now. For those listening, it's a forest with trees in it, but like there's spaces and, just like kind of on a hike. It's like, and it's a looped hike or whatever. It doesn't have that much it's a ton of variation, but not a point that's like the pot of gold type situation. And so you're just picking an arbitrary point because it's always just you here now, thinking that that one's going to mean something because other people have tried it and a lot of them got there and they're like, oh shit, didn't do the thing that I thought. But you're still going to convince yourself that it is going to do something. And so you're going to try and get there as fast as possible so that you can pick another point and get to the next point. And what you're not realizing is that journey, journey is the destination. It's cliche, but it really is. And so intuition is like comes with that recognition that like, no, this is it. It's not that, it's this right now. Because then you settle down, then it's not about getting there quickly. It's not, you no longer sprint there. You're walking. And if you're slowly walking a hike, how much more are you going to take in? You can still be aware a few steps ahead of you, and you're actually aware of it. And there's that sensitivity to it based on your proximity and your awareness, because, our vision and everything we do and see, it's not just like we're not looking through little straw holes. We're taking in a lot right now. But if you're entirely focused on getting to a point, there's going to be no intuition whatsoever. Because imagine sprinting. Like, how much of your environment are you taking in as you sprint? How much are you hearing? How much are you feeling? You're feeling the wind going past you, but everything's a blur. And that's kind of what it feels like when you're trying to get somewhere. You don't even remember what things you did in a day because it's trying to get to the next thing, or you're not at least paying close attention. You keep missing stuff and missing stuff and missing stuff because this is it. And that's where the intuition comes from, I think, is just the settling and actually allowing the environment to like settle in, almost like your eyes adjusting in the dark. You have to settle in order for them to adjust to the situation that's actually happening. And then, you get to the top of the hill or the bottom of a hill and you're not caught off guard by so many shifts in terrain. You see a wall. It's like, you see it coming and you climb over it. You're not as, you don't stumble and fall as much, and not in the sense of like, doing things quote unquote imperfectly, but just like being destructive and doing things that you could have maybe not ran into if you were paying a little bit more attention and being a little more sensitive to this, as opposed to your idea of that you think is going to mean something about you.
I think that's why it's so dangerous to believe in the myth of happiness. We were talking about this earlier, just you and I, this idea that we can be happy. And I find that really interesting because often there are emotions, there are states of mind that we don't want to be. Like, we don't want to be guilty, we don't want to be sad, we don't want to be angry. But we're never really any of those things. We're always all of those things. We're always the thing that can be those things. And so when we believe in this myth of happiness, that you can be happy, it really is disregarding the fact that you will never be more than what you are right now. And that happiness is not something you can attain, but is something that you can tune into depending on your focus. And what's interesting there is that it's not the happiness that you're thinking about, because the happiness that you're thinking about is largely informed according to your bias and your desire to escape the suffering. Whereas true happiness isn't necessarily running around with balloons and streamers screaming your head off, having the time of your life, but is a sense of being yourself. So it's not actually being happy at all. But we find ourselves believing in this myth of happiness. And that's where that tunnel vision comes in. And the problem is that in our desire to find happiness, we get so caught up in the end result. As you said, we go sprinting through the forest, not recognizing that the trees that we're running into and the vines that we're tripping on are other people. And we get so very caught up in our quest for happiness that we start peddling the myth of happiness to other people. And eventually what you have is a snake oil salesman who is doing nothing but promising you that there is, in fact, a path to happiness, a path where you can be happy, where you will be something other than what you are, where this will be more than what it is. When in fact, you don't need the snake oil. You don't need the salesman. You don't need what they're peddling. You have everything you need right here in who you are, in what you are, if you just allow yourself to see it, to experience it. But that means throwing yourself into situations where the narrative is telling you you can't do that. Somebody could do that better. How do you know? You can't know unless you get into the situation. That's why it's so important to rely on yourself. That's why it's so important to remember that although other people might be able to provide you with some vague direction, that direction is always going to be informed by their own bias, not by your life.
And even with the experience of happiness, or maybe, I don't know, I feel like there's this like egotistical happiness that we're kind of searching for in a sense, but you start to realize that all it ever is a shifting in your assumptions about something, like assuming that it means more about you, assuming that you did something that's making your value higher, like means something. Like I can remember the day I got accepted into the college that I went to. Like it was amazing. It was like, this is one of the best days. Like I didn't think I was gonna get this, and got into the school within it that I wanted to. And it was like, I was really happy. Why? Because I thought it meant something about my character, about my story. I was now more, because I could now attach myself to this label, to this brand, essentially. That's what a school is. If they're, it's like, it's just another, it's like wearing a fucking Gucci shirt. But that's why I was so happy that day. And that's why leading up to it, I was a little nervous. Like, oh, am I gonna get into the school I want to? Like, but it's just a shift in assumptions, because I think it means something about my value. I now see myself as more valuable. I'm now making the assumption that I am more valuable. And that's where that happiness comes from. And so that's why we have snake oil motherfuckers pushing like positivity affirmations and shit. Just assume something different about yourself. That's all. You've been assuming this thing about yourself. Just assume something else. So it's this idea that we can control happiness. Like that. Oh my God. So much of it comes from that there's a way to control how I feel. And that's, I think, a lot of where we're butting up against within society, is that we have this illusion that we can control how we feel. So we're trying all of the ways to feel better, and we're exhausting all the options. And I think we're getting to a point where we've tried a lot of options, a lot of different ways to try and feel happier, to control happiness, as opposed to your point, settling in to where we're at, to looking around, to realizing, oh, I'm at the root. What do I actually need? Like all of those assumptions, shifting assumption, shifting assumption was getting exhausting. And then there's the maintenance of the assumption. I have to keep maintaining this perspective of myself in order to be happy. If I'm trying to control happiness, I'm trying to curate happiness. And I think that was, soon or a little bit before Dualistic Unity started, I think that was kind of what I went through with realizing, oh, maybe, the whole story I've been telling myself isn't actually me. Maybe it's never actually me, because that time I was going through something, exhausted, all of the options that worked for a while. It's like they expired. And then I was left with myself. And with that, there's the opportunity to freak out for sure. Or there's the opportunity to realize, oh, none of my thoughts about myself are ever the truth. None of my assumptions about myself, whether they're positive or negative, maybe I don't know. Because oh my gosh, for so long, it's like you have one side, you do the other. It's like, oh, you're feeling down, just think happy thoughts. It's like, what kind of thoughts are those? Thoughts about you looking a certain way, getting to a certain point, being seen in a certain way, having a certain degree of value. Those are the happy thoughts. Doing something that makes you more. And that's, oh my gosh, like that's never the case. And so happiness isn't something you can control. Of course, the feelings aren't something you can control. You're just going through variations at all times. There's not actually a way to control it. And so that's what people try and do, is they're striving for it. They see it as a way for themselves to feel better about themselves, because now they're, helping people get to happiness, but they're using that identity as their thing to feel better about themselves. So what are they leaving everyone else with? Needing to come up with a way to think about themselves, to feel better about themselves, because that's what they're doing in that role when they're, teaching or telling or sharing or giving you this magical silver bullet that's going to make you happy. But they're not actually happy here and now. They're just maintaining a perspective of themselves that they're helping other people that's making them happy. So they're using you to feel happiness themselves, which is pretty fucked up too.
But it's the unfortunate consequence of believing in the myth of happiness. Because if you believe in the myth of happiness, then you can get to happiness. But if you can get to happiness, that means you can also lose happiness. And so there is this doubt that grows in the background. And so you have to go more and more out of your way to validate what you're doing, which immediately means followers. And so that is kind of the consequence of believing in the myth of happiness. But the problem is that as you are pursuing happiness, or you're afraid of losing happiness, so it becomes enlightenment in another form or another name, all of that attention, all of that time goes into sustaining whatever your ideal of happiness is, whether it's constant bliss or you're speaking in a monotone yoga teacher voice or what. And so you are very much distracted from what's actually happening around you, because all of this quest for happiness is happening inside your brain. It's all happening inside your mind. It's all you pursuing a fiction, and then you telling yourself that you are either close to or farther away from that fiction, which is also fictional. So now you're living in this world of measuring your progress and measuring your value and chasing something that does not exist, and all of which is reinforcing this idea of yourself. And that stops you from recognizing what is actually happening in the world around you. And if you think about what I'm saying right here, it's the reason that society is so hesitant to change. It's the reason that the world is not waking up to the fact that we're brutalizing this planet. We're so busy trying to feel better. We don't recognize that our quest to feel better is causing a lot of our suffering, which is causing us to want to feel better, which is causing our suffering. And so we're so caught up in this loop, we're so caught up in ourselves, that there's no attention left to look around. There's no attention left to see what's happening. And so government becomes more and more corrupt, more obviously corrupt. Our priorities become more and more askew. We come up with more and more justifications. We worship people for the most superficial reasons. And that's it. And it's largely just because we're not looking around. We're caught up trying to feel better about ourselves. And so we're looking at what we think would make ourselves feel better. Oh, that person's rich. That would make me feel good. Oh, that person's handsome. That would make me feel good. Oh, that person has the best car. That would make me feel good. It's like, would it though? For how long? Have you thought about this? It's like, well, no, because if I think about it, it all falls apart. And then I'm left with the world as it is. If I don't know how to relax, that's not a fun experience.
No, if I have a aversion to relaxation, I'm going to find an excuse to not do it. And that's what we keep running through. I keep trying to do shit. Like, if I don't see myself as someone who could, or don't feel like it's, and make assumptions about the right thing to do, whatever, and that's not a part of it, then I'm going to come up with excuses to not feel it. But that last part about, feeling like it's going to stick, like, that is not something we want to question. It's like, because if you're striving for this myth of happiness or enlightenment, it goes along with the assumption that it's gonna stick. And then you're gonna just be happy forever. Like, you get to it when you're what, 30, 40, 50-ish, and then it's just that. It's like, what does that look like? And even thinking, okay, so say you really want to be happy, and I were to tell you that happiness is sitting on the couch, kind of the idiocracy situation, where there's sitting on the couch with the toilet underneath them and the soda can next to them and the food that gets delivered literally to their gullet, and they have a TV in front of them nonstop playing it. Like, is that happiness? No. Is that something maybe you could sit down and watch something from time to time? Sure. But even in that, then you're like, all right, I want to do something else now. And so we're constantly moving through different things, different situations. We see how vital variation is in our lives, because as soon as you're like, okay, you get to do one thing for the rest of your life, you got to throw this ball against the wall forever, and you're going to feel really good the whole time. Even if you were if I could tell you, like, you're going to feel amazing the whole time, best you ever felt, and you're just doing the same thing over and over. Eventually, you're going to be like, I kind of want to do something else, and I will feel shitty to do that, just to do something else. And so we're experiencing variation all the time, and yet we still maintain this idea of, like, the myth of happiness, of getting to the place in which we're happy. Like, it's wild to say out loud. It's kind of like we can get into, like, the absurdity of heaven too, but just looking at that, happiness, enlightenment, it comes with the assumption that it's done, that there's a point that it ends, that it stays the same for an extended period of time. And if you actually look at that for a bit, you're like, no, I don't want to look at that. And then you run. But then if you look at it long enough and you're like, fuck, okay, so that doesn't really make sense. I've been spending my whole life trying to get to that point, but I wouldn't even want that point. Brings you back to where you're at. Like, oh, fuck, I have the same opportunity right now to experience whatever I'm going to experience. And if I can go through that myth of getting to a spot in which everything's good forever, then you realize that's not even something that you would want when you're actually willing to sit on it and look at it. And fuck, that's wild, because it's the same thing for heaven. Like, we look at it like, I want to get to heaven, but no one actually looks at it and thinks about the experience itself and how fucking absurd it is. And we've talked about it in the past, just how, like, you think of heaven as this perfect, kind of like that happiness, the myth of happiness, like everything you want at all times and constantly getting that. But then if you're in heaven, then everyone has variations of their experience and their idea of heaven. And so it's all of this crossover and shifts and blah, blah, blah. And then there's no way for that to actually play out in that sense. So then you're just left, like, by yourself in a room with all the things you really enjoy, but then you'd want other people to be there, but what, you want them to do exactly what you want to do at all times? How long would that last? And then you're like, all right, some variation, but like just the right amount of variation. Then you're like, nah, that's still too much control. And eventually you get to that point where you're like, oh, this has the potential to be that. But like, we don't even sit in the spot of wondering, what would perpetual happiness be like? What would my idea of heaven be like? We just want to kind of like keep it in mind in the future to give us something to do, to like still have an ability to be certain, because then there's a right way to get there, and then there's a right way to do it. But if you actually look at the experience and the situation in itself, you wouldn't want that. So then there isn't as much to strive for. What, you're striving for variation? Variation's happening right now. The beauty is you are that variation, always shifting. So then you very much can come back to yourself and just relax a little bit as it goes, and maybe scratch your head and think like, oh, maybe this is what I'm trying to get to. Like the experience I'm trying to get to is the one that I'm doing.
Once I relax into it, that seems almost fucking obvious. That's the point. Once I relax into the experience I'm having, it makes sense. Oh, yeah, I should focus on the experience I'm having. But if I can't relax, if I'm always focused on the future, if I'm always trying to strive for that myth of happiness, for Shangri-La, then I'm never looking around at what I'm experiencing right now. And unfortunately, there is no way to communicate how much is here right now. But, and I want to bring this back to what we mean by happy, because I think we forget this. You know, it's kind of like, what do you mean by heaven? It's like, oh, you know, it's all the people I've ever loved. It's like, have you thought about that? Have you thought about the last couple of conversations you've had with the people that you've loved? Is that really what you want to do for eternity? Right? People don't generally think past, you know, but it's got clouds and halos and harps and shit. It looks nice. You know, it's they promise it's going to be dope, you know, that kind of thing. And there's no detail there whatsoever, but it's the promise of there being something more than what we're experiencing right now. And when we remove that, what we're left with is the question of what can we do with right now, which becomes less about striving to become more and more about not doing that at all, to recognize how much you already are. And so the experience becomes very different, and you have to be patient. You have to understand that you can't rush your development, because that is in itself a stage of your development, impatience. And so it's just about being with yourself, moving through your life, taking every opportunity that you can to reflect, not to cast judgment and not to analyze your progress, but to just reflect and consider and be aware of. But it's very difficult to do that when you are protecting a fiction that demands you protect yourself, build yourself, defend yourself, and more importantly, prove yourself, that you must be perceived a certain way. There's a whole fiction that goes with this, and the alternative is being here. And that sounds really unsatisfying until you do it. And then when you're doing it, you're like, oh, right. And you can think about moments in your life right now. Maybe you were sitting on a park bench as the sun was going down. Maybe you were hanging out with a friend in their car, listening to some music and going, you know, down the road, singing together. It was something where you were invested in the moment you were having. And at that moment, none of your plans, none of your strategies, none of your striving for happiness had anything to do with that experience. That experience came from you surrendering to where you were and living for you. And that is not something that you have to strive to do. It's something that you can do right now, because that's what happiness really is. It's fulfillment. It's not a state of laughing all the time and having a smile from ear to ear constantly, because that's creepy. But it is a state of being able to roll up your sleeves, get some work done, challenge yourself, maybe get a splinter or two or whatever the hell it might be. And then at the end of the day, just feel good with how much you've done, not feel like you're more, but just to be at peace with what you've done and then move on to the next part of your day. It's not about it proving anything about you or being about you. It's just about your life, not the fiction of you here and now. The older I get, the more obvious this becomes. And every time I relax, that's when it's more obvious. But when we have that tunnel vision, when we're trying to get somewhere, when we're afraid, because obviously that's the driving force behind a lot of our tunnel vision. I'm afraid I'm not enough. I'm afraid something's going to diminish me. I need to get there because then I won't have to be afraid anymore. But it's just dealing with the fact that that whole spectrum is always going to be there. You're always going to want to feel like there's a destination where life isn't going to be what life has always been. The only thing you can do is just get better at living.
And so because happiness isn't something that you get to, or that idea of it isn't something that you achieve, it's kind of like it has the potential to arise naturally. And so if you think about like running towards happiness, you're going to have an idea, and it's always like what I was picturing, some Dr. Seuss, maybe like Horton Hears a Who, or whichever one we watched recently, like one of those little Smurf like characters. Like as you're running through, say, a forest or on a path or whatever, it's like if that was the embodiment of happiness, like you think it's over there, and it's like starts running alongside you from time to time, and it's like trying to get your attention, like waving at you, but you're so sure that it's in that point that you keep missing it, keep missing it, keep missing it, keep missing it, because literally, because you're maintaining that idea of there being a right way, there being a correct path to happiness. That's all fucking assumption. And instead of letting go of that idea of control, that you can control your way to happiness, it's always like has the potential to bubble up. And it's not always going to necessarily be there, but at least there's the potential for it to be there as you settle in. And I kind of had that thought before this episode, because everything we've filmed today so far, I've been like, I have no fucking idea what's going to come up. And this morning I was feeling uncomfortable that I was like, oh, should I try and think of something, whatever. And it's like basically almost always the case for all of our episodes. And it always ends up totally fine, obviously. And at the same time, I have no fucking idea how things go as I'm going. Like, I don't know what the fuck is going on in this episode. I don't know. We're just talking. But then this time around, it hit me like same amount of, I don't know what's going to happen, but it was kind of like exciting in the sense that I'm going to find out with you as we're talking. Like, this is me finding out what this episode is going to be about. And there's so much more excitement in that. And as long as you're not maintaining like a correct way for you to do things, a correct point in which happiness, or I don't even know what the measurement I look to sometimes for this, like the right way to be myself, the right way to do a podcast, like that doesn't exist, especially not with this, because it is just expression of ourselves. Plenty of podcasts want to think there's a right way. So they very much, I've some friends who do podcasts, and they'll spend hours and hours and hours and hours preparing for an episode. And it's cool. Like there's different types of things too. Like he's like people like that, typically very much like interview based, and, trying to learn about the person. So it can be cool to bring things up that are from an older point, but it's very much within control. Like there is a right way, and I can figure out the right way for it to be expressed. And then all of the expressions that come from conversation like that are like variations of there being a right way. Like this insight is going to help you with this. This is going to help you get the thing that you want, make $10 million, build perfect body, have the best diet, optimize this, optimize that, optimize this, always selling the thing that's going to allow you to get to that point in which you're happy that doesn't exist, because they're all variations. Like even like just that word is so commonly thrown around, and all of that is informing that in a sense, like, have a bunch of money because that's on the path. That's one of the paths to happiness. Like, be in really good shape because that's another path to happiness. And all of these things that were being told and shown, all reinforcing the myth, that it's somewhere down the road. And so then you get on this journey, this path towards getting to a thing that then has happiness tied to it. But anyone who experiences those things knows that there's just as much variation in their experience then as there was when they weren't at that point. Like there is, if you have millions of dollars, there is still the potential to be happy that continues to arise in it. It's not to say that you're then not going to be able to experience, but it's no more of a potential than wherever you're at right now for it to arise, and not for you to get to it or find it right now. It's not like you dig around in a fucking sandbox that you're sitting in. It's like, I'm not on a journey, but I'm looking for happiness. Like that's the journey right there, whether you're digging around you or you're striving and think it's 1,000 miles in front of you. It arises when you're not looking, or at least has the potential to. And you start to realize, like, oh, if I can just relax, then that's kind of the root of my experience right now. And so happiness becomes not even a thing that's so much focused on or considered or tried to be found, because it's like you stop thinking so much about yourself and you're just involved in what you're doing and being fully involved, enthusiastic in what you're doing. Enthusiasm and happiness aren't the same thing. You can always be enthusiastic about whatever you're going through, and if you're not, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong either. I'm not saying that, but the priorities start to shift because you start to realize, like, oh, there's influence here, not control, but influence. Because happiness, even that is kind of based on this, very much based on an assumption and having to think about things in a certain way in order to feel it.
It's interesting because as you mentioned that, it strikes me that we say happiness, but the concept of happiness is kind of this birthday party surrounded by people who love you kind of hallmark moment image. The reality of happiness is empowerment. The reality of happiness is when you're going through life and you're dealing with challenges, knowing that you can deal with those challenges. That is happiness. And it's not because everything is always great. It's because you don't feel like you're a problem. I would say that lack of tearing yourself down is the reality of happiness. But so long as you are pursuing happiness, you are going to tear yourself down for not being close enough to it, not experiencing it yet, judging yourself for how far you are from it, as well as being afraid to lose it. When you do experience something like it, when you experience something where like, this could be it, this must be happiness, I feel satisfied, then all of a sudden you're afraid. You get what you want and suddenly you're afraid to lose that thing. Whereas the alternative is to be you, to stop trying to be happy and thus no longer being anything else, just being you. And that is everything that you could feel. But if you're trying to be any one thing, you're cutting yourself off from your potential. And it's only because it's daunting at first to sit in that giant space that is the directionless chasm of life, where you're just sitting here now going, well, I could do anything. What do I do though? Well, anything you want. Pick a direction. The only thing that's really changed is, why are you doing it? If you're doing it to be more, it is disempowering you. If you're doing it because you're already whole and complete, and it's something that you're curious about and have some enthusiasm about and want to know more about, then go do it. Watch yourself unfold and watch the urge to judge your progress come up. It's another opportunity to go through the same lesson. Stop trying to become more. And there is no better way to learn that than to start off at the bottom of something.
Well said. Because as long as you're holding on to becoming more, like you're always going to feel less. Like it goes hand in hand. You can't feel like you're enough and think you can be more, because the idea of more that you're holding on to is enough. And if you're holding on to that, then you're not there. They go together. And even if you feel like you've gotten to a spot in which you are more, that's reinforcing the same exact thing. If you're more than you were, a year ago, that means you can be more than you are now in a year from now. And it's like we trade that certainty for freedom. Like we'd rather just run on a treadmill for our entire life thinking that we're doing something, instead of settling into the experience that we're in without that control or direction, thinking that we're going somewhere and not. It's kind of like we're all just like on a treadmill pointing in a direction, thinking that we're going to that thing, shifting our assumptions, being told things, telling other people things, assuming, and it's like that's where our value is the whole time, unchanged, just with a shifting assumption. So we'll trade that idea, because in order to maintain that, you have to think. You got to think to maintain your assumptions about things. And we're talking about the experience without so many assumptions, without thinking so much, or at least not being so enthralled by it that you can't look away. At least that, because thinking is a tool. Like, it's incredible to be able to think about stuff, ponder things, wonder about things. But it's like, are you wondering about things, or are you thinking about yourself, worrying about yourself, judging yourself, focusing on yourself, thinking about how you're going to become more, thinking about how little you are right now, making assumption after assumption after assumption over and over and over about yourself, and just going on a fucking hamster wheel, considering where your value lies based on what you think you are, based on assumptions that you continue to make, based on this fictitious identity, this fictitious story you keep making assumptions about, that's ever changing. It's constantly changing, moment to moment. You might be feeling a certain way about it. And there's like a difference in your experience when it's not that. And so that whatever your thoughts about happiness are within that realm of thinking about yourself. Like, it's not, happiness isn't what's left. It's just you right now, more or less free. Like, free, and free doesn't mean happy. It means free from the illusions you keep coming up with to think that you can be sure of something. Because if you can't be sure about something in your environment or in reality or about someone else, you're going to come back to yourself. And then you're going to make assumptions about others just to feel like you can know that. And then you're just going to keep making assumptions about yourself because it's something you think you can know. Well, I've been with myself all my life. Like, no, you've been telling yourself a story. You've been maintaining a story for a lot of your life. You never actually been with yourself in that sense. Like, I think I can know myself because I've been myself my whole life, but that's never been what you thought that it was. So that's just, you're just as able to know yourself as you are a random person walking past you on the street, because you're not something that can be thought about or known. It's moment to moment. It's not even something that's maintained like a knowledge about yourself. It's like the only place you can know yourself is right now. That's the only spot. So it's not even like a built up thing. Oh, over an extended period of time, over 20 years, I've gotten to know myself. It's like you've just had a lot of shifting assumptions, and those assumptions are just being maintained right now, focusing on everything but what's actually happening right now.
It reminds me a lot of the allegory of Plato's cave. And it's because there are little details within that always make me kind of think about reality as a whole. Like, for example, the fact that all of the people within Plato's cave are all looking in one direction. They're all looking at the same cave wall. They're all looking at the same shapes and patterns on the cave wall. And so the important part isn't that they're looking at the cave wall. The important part is that they are all looking in one direction. And so they are blind to the rest of the cave. And because all they know is the cave wall and the shapes on the cave wall, they derive happiness according to who can interpret the shapes the best. That is their happiness, is a form of competition over something that's not even real. But that's the happiness that they're chasing. Whereas if you were to remove somebody from that cave and bring them outside, they would no longer be looking for an end result. They'd no longer be looking at the wall. They would be in reality, in the light. But then they would seem crazy to anybody who was still measuring their value and how happy they could be based on their ability to interpret the illusions. And that's why that story or that allegory is so powerful. It's not necessarily for the person who's found freedom, because that's kind of actually tragic, because he goes back in and nobody wants to understand him. It's for the people who don't want to understand him, the people who actually think that eventually they will find happiness and meaning and truth in illusions.
Oh man, because if you think about someone who's, gets something new and they kind of expect, because say a new car or a new house or whatever, and then someone comes around and just like, maybe they're not aggressive towards you, but they just don't really say like, oh, that's a nice car, or, oh, that's a nice house. There's almost like a deflation in that, because you need that in order, because like, why the fuck else would you do that if not for that case? There's the functionality. I'm not discounting the functionality of certain things that you get and whatever, but for the most part, you know what I mean, with brands and whatnot, and that whole fucking illusion that we can do things that mean something about us. And if you were to see someone who's doing that and you're like, this means nothing about you, right? They'd be like, what? Yes, it does, because they're making the assumption that there's something that can be, someone or something that can be thought about. And so even saying that, this means nothing about you, right? It's like there's going to be an error, like 404 read error there, because it's not within their purview, because there's a assumption that there's something that can be thought about. So of course it means something, because all of my judgments mean something about those people, and all of my judgments about myself mean something about me. So this thing must mean something about me. And so even within that conversation, like, you can't even adequately is like, you can, by being yourself or not needing that yourself and being free in yourself and whatever, but it's not expressing that for someone else to get it, because that's not it. Then you're doing it for someone else, no differently than someone else is buying a car for someone else, for how they're viewed. So it goes the same hand in hand. If you're living your life trying to convince someone else or teach someone else or tell someone else, you're living for them in order to think that you matter more, because you've been able to convince other people of something that you think is the right thing, the right way to live. So it's entirely like, being free is entirely separate from an ability to measure it, which I think is where a lot of the discomfort comes from. Like, I'm so used to measuring myself that when I'm relaxed, like, there isn't, it's like, how do I, but where, but what? It's like, no, you're free. You don't have to measure yourself. But how do I feel? It's like, just right now, just pay attention. It's not about feeling any sort. You're going to feel a lot. You're going to feel a lot of different things right here. It kind of comes with it, but it's not about getting to a point that means something about you, or hope that someone else sees you in a certain way. So it's an entirely different mentality, experience. Like, we can't use our existing barometers to express it or explain it or convince anyone of it, or try and get anyone to a certain point that they're not in. Kind of like the start of the episode, there's nothing I can say that gets you to a point. that's quote unquote better, or that's freer. Like, that opportunity is right now, and that's on you. That's not on me. We're just talking here. If you resonate with something, it's only because you right now take it in and ponder it within yourself, not thinking that, oh, they gave me this, or that person gave me this, or guided me in this way. It's like, that's another way to pass off responsibility. Like, the only reason that anything in any situation resonates with you, or you feel like you learned something, is because you took it in. But you did that. And all it is realizing that you can relax right now. And so all of the insights are just realizing more and more why you're not relaxed, or being willing more and more to just be here and not avoid the uncertainty right here. And which is just covering your eyes, because there's not even a spot you can avoid the reality of uncertainty. You can just close your eyes to it and run around like a chicken with your head cut off, thinking that there is a certainty, that there is a way to control your way to the fucking peak of the mountain, as if that even exists, as if anything exists outside of right now, outside of your experience right now. The whole environment, tapestry, situation, whatever you're looking at, like, that's like it's just you right now going through whatever you're going through, with a willingness to respond in whatever way, shape, or form. So there's maybe a lot of assumptions as to why that's not the case, and that's what we're going through. But still, like, it's just you here with a bunch of assumptions about why you think you shouldn't be, or where you think you're going, or about yourself, or about everything outside of that.
And that's going to go with you into happiness. Let's just say that there is this magical Shangri-La like place called happiness. And one day you're going to get there. If you just strive hard enough, you're going to get there. And when you get there, you're going to still be you, which means that now you're going to be in this, let's say, bright, well-ordained palace of happiness, still judging the decor, still judging yourself for taking so long to get there, still looking for some way to feel better about yourself and therefore tearing something down. You're still going to exist within this comparative mindset. You're still going to be looking at yourself and making the situation, or making the experience of happiness, whatever it is you want it to be, based on how you see yourself. And that is always going to be your relationship with reality. It really is based on what you want to experience right now. But the more you're focused on what you want to experience in the future, the more you're focused on what you don't want to experience in the here and now, the less you're experiencing what is actually happening right now. And it isn't until you get better at the experience of living now that you actually start to understand what happiness is. You let go of the myth of happiness to discover the reality of happiness. And it's not the word, it's not the concept. It's nothing like what you're envisioning. I've said this before about peace. The peace that you're after is not the peace that you'll find. The happiness that you're looking for is a superficial version of the happiness that you will find if you allow yourself to just be. Because at least then you're living for you. And in that there is freedom. And in that freedom, there is risk. And in that risk, there's the potential for enthusiasm and discovery and fun at the end of the day. But it really just comes down to freeing yourself of the weight of the journey to happiness, because it's a concept like anything else. Abandon the concept, discover the reality. And the more you do that, the more you come back to here and now, the more you realize this is where things have always been happening. Remember, you will never get to a place where you are not there.
And so this reminds me of that paradox you've talked about before, where you're holding a box, or you're within a box, and then you reach into a box, and then the hand is in the box. So if you think about, the magical land of happiness that you see yourself getting to, but you're still you, like the you that you are right now, you're there with the same assumptions about things. Like, you picture yourself there, and you're just picturing yourself here because it's the same potential. Like, you think you're going to do all these things to get to that spot. Like, you have the same potential right now to be in that place because it's just here. It's just you here. And so as you continue to think about that place, it's just like you being in that place you're imagining is like you right now, you're just not willing to pay attention because it can't possibly be here. It's got to be somewhere else because I keep thinking about myself and I have all of these assumptions about myself. And so that couldn't possibly be the case. But it's the assumptions that you keep trying to come up with, using the spiritual guru or whatever, or person that's going to get you to that spot. And like everyone's sitting in that spot. Like it's right here. And it's so it's so interesting that it just comes down to the assumptions. Stop making so many goddamn assumptions. Stop thinking about yourself so much, and what you're left with is that spot that you're trying to get to. Because the thing that's convincing you that you're not there right now are your assumptions. Your assumptions about what's happening, your assumptions about what you are, how you're doing, where you're at. They're all just assumptions, but they're not the reality of what's actually happening right now. Your assumptions about where you are not where you are. Your assumptions about how you're doing is not how you're doing. Your assumptions of where your value lies is not where your value lies. And so without all of that, you're just left with where you're at, and then there's nothing telling you that you're not in that spot with the same infinite potential that you would be if you were able to drop yourself in happiness land.
Well, I can honestly say, and I'm saying this a little tongue in cheek, but not really, I'm happy with how this episode turned out. I really had no idea what we were walking into in this conversation. And I think that's the point, is that at one point I would have felt that the episode had to be a certain way in order for me to be content with it. I'm more or less just happy to be recording the episode and having the conversation. I'm looking at it as an opportunity here and now, not an opportunity outside of here and now. And so there really is no pressure for the episode to be anything other than what it is. Whereas if I was trying to make it so this is going to be the best episode of Dualistic Unity ever, there would be so much pressure there. And why? Because if it was the best episode of Dualistic Unity ever, then all of a sudden I would somehow be more. It would still be me, just with another episode. So it really is the difference between the myth that the end result is promising you, that you will be more once you get there, versus the reality of you will always be you. And you will always have the full spectrum in terms of how you can respond to yourself here and now. But if you just accept what you are, stop trying to be more, stop trying to establish your value, stop trying to judge your progress, and just allow yourself to unfold, life takes on a totally different feeling. And you discover the reality of happiness.
Take the pressure off, or at least let go of all of your assumptions that are making you think that there is so much goddamn pressure right now. But I'm also very, very happy with how this episode went, because it's been a lot of fun, because I was uncertain as shit going into it. And look at that. We just talked about happiness for a little over an hour, or the myth thereof. So appreciate everyone for tuning in. This has been a blast, and we'll talk to you soon.
And don't forget, Jackie and Amanda are now doing their own live series every Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Join them at twitch.tv/dualistic unity, or check them out on our YouTube channel as well. They will be recording more episodes in season 6. They just recorded the episode before this, so tune in for their next episode in episode 4.
Talk to you soon, everyone.
Bye. Bam. Awesome.
Fuck yeah. That was good, dude. I'm so like each one today, I'm like, damn, there's gonna be a lot of good clips out of this. Holy fuck. Like as we're going, I'm like, yo, chill with that.
I had to redeem myself after the fucking season 6, episode 1. I'm pretty sure I flopped hard on that, man.
Dude,
I'm
you keep saying
certain.
that. Like I was sitting right next to you. Like
I had this rubber band kind of like I'm fucking tapped feeling. Like
yeah. Oh, I hear you, but I can't promise anything, but that is not how I remember it. So
well, I appreciate that.
So we're definitely calling this one the myth of happiness.
Fuck, no
Right.
shit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.